Hello everyone, and welcome back to Amateur Hour Projects. Today, we're going to take a look at the bonsai tree from their botanical collection from LEGO. Now this is very pretty. I cannot wait to put this together, especially the blossoms. There's not a whole lot of information on the back. So let's go ahead and open it up, and we'll get to it. Alright, so with 878 pieces, although most of them are probably not going to be used at one time, as you can switch out between types of leaves. This shouldn't take too long, shouldn't be too big of a project. Doesn't look like just doesn't look like too many pieces, so shouldn't be too bad of a deal here. So let's go ahead and get to it, and see you in a bit.
Okay, so this was another really fun build. It turns out very beautiful in the end. I had a lot of fun making this. Lots of little pieces go into this one, but in the end I think it was worth it. So let's go ahead and we'll talk a little bit about bonsai trees and their history. So bonsai is the Japanese and ancient Chinese art of growing and training miniature trees in containers, developed from the traditional Chinese art form of Beijing. Beijing and bonsai differ in that the former attempts to display wilder, more naturalistic scenes, often representing landscapes, including elements such as water, rocks, or figurines. On the other hand, bonsai typically focuses on a single tree or a group of trees of the same species, with a higher level of aesthetic refinement. The word bonsai has become an umbrella term in English, attached to many forms of diminutive potted plants, and also on occasion to other living and non-living things. According to Stephen Orr in the New York Times, the term should be reserved for plants that are grown in shallow containers, following the precise tenets of bonsai pruning and training, resulting in an artful miniature replica of a full-grown tree in nature. In the most restrictive sense, bonsai refers to miniaturized, container-grown trees adhering to Japanese tradition and principles. The purposes of bonsai are primarily contemplation for the viewer and the pleasant exercise of effort and ingenuity for the grower. By contrast with other plant cultivation practices, bonsai is not intended for production of food or for medicine. Instead, bonsai practice focuses on long-term cultivation and shaping of one or more small trees growing in a container. A bonsai is created beginning with a specimen of source material. This may be a cutting, seedling, or small tree of a species suitable for bonsai development. Bonsai can be created from nearly any perennial woody stem tree or shrub species that produces true branches, and it can be cultivated to remain small through pot confinement with crown and root pruning. Some species are popular as bonsai material because they have characteristics such as small leaves or needles that make them appropriate for the compact visual scope of bonsai. The source specimen is shaped to be relatively small and to meet the aesthetic standards of bonsai, which emphasizes not the entirety of grand sceneries, but rather only the tree itself. When the candidate bonsai nears its planned final stage, it is planted in a display pot, usually one designed for bonsai display in one of a few accepted shapes and proportions. From that point forward, its growth is restricted by the pot environment. Throughout the year, the bonsai is shaped to limit growth, redistribute foliar vigor to areas requiring further development, and meet the artist's detailed design. Talking a little bit about the build here before we go back into bonsai history lesson. I really like the way that this came out. Some of the building techniques were pretty fun here. And the whole tree is kind of sitting at a funny angle from the base. And it really looks nice. It really does give it like a true tree aesthetic, especially with the different colored bricks that they put on there. It's very enjoyable to build this. For some reason I find this whole section pretty funny. It's just a bag of stones essentially, and pour it in. Probably my favorite section of this whole build. Just how simple and silly it is. The Japanese art of bonsai originated from the Chinese practice of penjing. From the 6th century onward, imperial embassy personnel and Buddhist students from Japan visited and returned from mainland China. They brought back many Chinese ideas and goods, including container plantings. Over time, these container plantings began to appear in Japanese writings and representative art. A close relationship between Japan's Zen Buddhism and the potted trees began to shape bonsai reputation and aesthetics. In the medieval period, Chinese Zen Buddhist monks taught at Japan's monasteries. One of the monks' activities was to introduce political leaders to various arts of miniature landscapes as admirable accomplishments for men of taste and learning. Potted landscape arrangements up to this period included miniature figurines after the Chinese fashion. Japanese artists eventually adopted a similar style for bonsai, increasing focus on the tree by removing miniatures and other decorations, and using smaller, plainer pots. Around the 14th century, the term for dwarf potted trees was the bowls tree, or hachi-noki. This indicated use of a fairly deep pot rather than the shallow pot denoted by the eventual term bonsai. Bonsai cultivation reached a high level of expertise in this period.
Alright, so that's the bonsai tree, but I think I like the blossoms better. So let's go ahead and remove this. Get off. Get off.
Bonsai dating to the 17th century have survived to the present. One of the oldest known living bonsai trees, considered one of the national treasures of Japan, can be seen in the Tokyo Imperial Palace collection. A 5-needle pine known as Sandai Shogun no Matsu is thought to be at least 500 years old and was trained as a bonsai by 1610. By the end of the 18th century, bonsai cultivation in Japan was becoming widespread and began to interest the general public. In the Tenmei era, an exhibit of traditional dwarf potted pines began to be held every year in Kyoto. Connoisseurs from 5 provinces and neighboring areas would bring 1 or 2 plants each to the show in order to submit them to visitors for ranking. In Japan, after 1800, bonsai began to move from being the esoteric practice of a few specialists to becoming a widely popular art form and hobby. Japanese scholars of Chinese arts gathered in the early 19th century to discuss recent styles in the art of miniature trees. Many terms and concepts adopted by this group were derived from this meeting. The Japanese version of potted trees were renamed to bonsai. This word described a shallow container and not a deeper bowl style. The term bonsai, however, would not become broadly used for nearly a century. In 1868, the popularity of bonsai began to grow outside the limited scope of scholars and the nobility due to the Meiji Emperor encouraging interest in bonsai after the move to the new capital in Tokyo. From this point, bonsai shaping aesthetics, techniques, and tools became increasingly sophisticated as bonsai popularity grew in Japan. Prior to World War II, International interest in bonsai was fueled by increased trade in trees and the appearance of books in popular foreign languages. By 1914, the first national annual bonsai show was held in Tokyo's Hibiya Park. Books on bonsai printed in English started appearing in Japan by 1935. By 1940, about 300 bonsai dealers worked in Tokyo. Some 150 species of trees were being cultivated, and thousands of specimens were shipped annually to Europe and America. The first bonsai nurseries and clubs in America were started by first and second generation Japanese immigrants. Though this progress to international markets and enthusiasts was interrupted by the war, by the 1940s, bonsai had become an art form of international interest and involvement. Following World War II, several trends made the Japanese tradition of bonsai increasingly accessible to Western and world audiences. One key trend was the increase in the number, scope, and prominence of bonsai exhibitions. The first World Bonsai Convention was held in Osaka in 1980. Another key trend was the increase in books on bonsai and related arts, being published for the first time in English and other languages for audiences outside of Japan. The increasing availability of expert bonsai training outside of Japan and the widening availability of specialized bonsai plant stock, soil components, tools, pots, and other accessory items also contributed to the spread of bonsai. Bonsai has now reached a worldwide audience. There are over 1,400 books on bonsai and the related arts in at least 28 languages, available in over 110 countries and territories.
And there we have it, the finished bonsai tree. Now I think this is very, very pretty. Probably one of the prettiest builds I've done. I really like the way that this turns out. It is incredibly, very calming and soothing, as bonsai trees are typically known to do. So I really enjoyed this. I hope you guys did too. Go ahead and give the video a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to see more. Let me know in the comments anything else that you want to see, any suggestions. And as always, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Have a great one.